So my name is Maddie. For those of you that don't know, I've been volunteering for GGBY, which is the Slackline Festival in Moab, Utah. I've been working as the sponsorship manager for GGBY for 3 years, and this will be my 4th year volunteering for them. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about sponsorships, how to do them effectively, some things I've learned along the way, and how to use it to benefit an event that you could be organizing yourself. I think a lot of people don't understand fully why sponsorships are so important and why they take such a large team, but they really do. Sponsorships, the whole benefit of them is that when you're organizing something, you have a budget, and if you can get anything out of that budget donated, it gives you more finances to spend on other things. So sponsorships are really important for financial purposes, but then also sponsorships are important for like having your event be like recognized by a larger population of people and different user groups. So if a sponsor is, if somebody of a company or a product is sponsoring our event and they are promoting the event as something they sponsor, it increases the visibility of our event, which is good for us because then more people come and we get more sponsors. It's a big network of just symbiotic relationships between different companies and us and the different people that work for our event. Our event being GGBY in this case, but that goes for obviously any event that you organize. So this year for GGBY, something that we've changed a little bit to help sponsorships function a little better is we don't have our sponsorship team being separate. Our sponsorship team is going to be under what's called our communications team. So with that, we have sponsorships, we have our social media, we have our like website design, photography, and videography. The reason all those kind of go together is because of the ways that you promote your event and the way that you promote your sponsors. They all fall under this umbrella of communications and networking. So we have our social media team, which is putting out stuff on Facebook, on Instagram, on our website. We have this year somebody doing PR for us, so she's going to be putting out a newsletter. She's going to be connecting us with local newspapers, getting the event publicized and getting the happenings of the event publicized. That way our sponsors get more recognition and get more visibility as well. So I'm going to keep referencing some of my notes, so when my camera goes on and off, that's just what I'm looking at. So some of the important things about sponsorship is just understanding that it's generally just networking. It's something that I feel I've been pretty good at naturally in life. I just tend to talk to people about what I'm doing. I don't do small talk very well, so when I actually am involved in a project, it's what I'm passionate about, and it allows me to talk to people. And through that is how I've connected a lot of people to Slackline US and to GGBY. And that is pretty much the key to sponsorships, is using every opportunity you can to talk to people about your event, building relationships, learning about other people's products, their events, their businesses, and how you can build this mutual relationship. With that, it's sometimes difficult because you'll find companies or people that want to be involved and their message or their values for their company don't align with what you have going on with your company or your business or your event or whatever. So sometimes it's kind of tricky. You have to be a little selective about who is sponsoring your event, because ultimately it is going to reflect. And a great example of that last year for GGBY, we had an alcoholic beverage sponsor our event, and we received some negative feedback from that. But ultimately, what that company had done is they just donated finances, they donated money to our our L&T team. And so for us, that was great because that's one of our core values is L&T here in the desert. And so it was really important. But we also have to look at that, like how does it reflect for us to have this company sponsor us, and what image is that creating for our event? So that's definitely important as you like start this whole process of networking, is figuring out your own values and finding sponsors that support those values. Yeah, so I have a bunch of questions that I'd like to go through that somebody sent me and that I've compiled. So let's go through those. We'll just start at the beginning, which is a great question of like, when do you start seeking sponsorships? At what part of the event, at what part of the planning do you start seeking sponsorships and looking for people to donate? I think generally earlier in the year is best. So the earlier in the year that you can contact companies is great, because at the beginning of the year, every company looks at their upcoming year, they plan their own budgets, and they set aside a certain amount of their time and energy and finances and what they're planning on being able to sponsor events. So if you can get in contact with them during those times, you have a better chance of getting those financial sponsorships. That being said, I've gotten sponsorships 2 weeks before GGBY before, and at that point I've had to say it's too soon. I can't fulfill the promises that I have to fulfill for sponsorships in order for us to have this relationship. So generally earlier is better, but it's an ongoing process. Once you've made a connection with a sponsor, you can actually ask them, like, when can I reach out to you again next year? Or when is the best time to reach out about this event in the future? And they'll just tell you. Some of them will actually reach back out to you. So I've had people that have been involved in the past that were really happy with the exposure they got. And so they contacted me again and said, like, hey, we'd still like to be involved in this event. Let me know how we can still be involved. So generally earlier in the year, but also be prepared for the unthinkable of 2 days before the event. It can happen. Next question was, how do you know what you need and what to ask for? That's a good question, and that highly depends on the event. It's easy to think that for like a Slackline festival like us, what we need sponsored or donated is Slacklines and gear, which is totally true. It's that is something in the last couple of years we've highly sought out for sponsorships. When we started GGBY, we were looking at kind of expanding and, putting more lines out there so that the wait to get on a high line was not as long, things like that. So our focus was mostly on food for our volunteers and gear. This year, we've decided not to expand the festival and to improve what we already have. So things that we'll be looking for sponsors this year is things like things to help like with our yoga zone. Like if we can get yoga mats donated for the workshops, that's something that improves the function of the event, but doesn't necessarily like, I don't know, you don't see it the same way that you see like the gear or the expanse of the event. Another type of sponsorship that you have to look for is money, because it takes a lot of money to organize certain events, especially a big one like GGBY. So generally, just in figuring out kind of what you need, you'll just need to work with your team, whoever is organizing your event. And especially at the beginning of your planning, start to do that. So actually this year with the coronavirus happening, the situation here in Moab is a very small town, and we get food sponsors for our volunteers from the local restaurants. Well, since Moab is a tourist town, there's no tourists here. There's been no business. The busiest time of the year has almost come and gone. So for us, we will not likely be able to get the sponsorships from the same sponsors that have repetitively sponsored us. So as we had a meeting a few weeks ago, and we start talking about our budgets for the year for each team, something that I, as the sponsorship manager, brought up was like, hey, here's the situation. We might not be able to get these sponsors that we've gotten in the past. So you guys as team leaders need to think about this when you're planning your budget. So generally, it's kind of like on a case-by-case basis. As you're doing your planning for your event, figure out what you need sponsored, what are your priorities, if they're financial, physical, or stuff like we've done in the past where we've had companies like come out and sponsor kind of an experience. There's so many different types of sponsorships, mostly just because they're this like relationship, this symbiotic relationship. So figure out what types of things you need sponsored for your event, prioritize them, and then get a plan in place to contact those sponsors. So that brings me to a good point. When you then establish this relationship with sponsors, how do you know what to give them in return for what they've given you? For GGBY, we put together what we call our sponsorship packet, and it pretty clearly lays out everything. We have a tiered system that based on your financial donation, you receive certain benefits. So the benefits that sponsors look for is exposure. They want their product or their company to be exposed and seen by a wider network of people. So we do things like social media posts. We do a certain number of social media posts depending on how large your donation is. We do exposure on our website, so we'll put their logo or branding on the website. We offer free tickets to the event because if they donate, loads of gear, we want them to be able to come out and experience what they're being a part of. It also helps them. They get to come out and they get to talk to the people at the event and do their own networking there. So those types of things are the things that we as a team and an event can turn around and give back to them. Sometimes it'll just depend what type of sponsor it is. So for instance, the local restaurants here, the local community here is not very interested in highlining. So we have to think about different ways that we can return their investment. So this year in particular, we're looking at things like if you eat at this certain restaurant in town a certain number of times, you get a discount on a ticket to the festival. That way, we are getting the food that the restaurant has donated to us, but in return, they're getting business and they're getting more exposure. So it's just about, honestly, sometimes working with a company and asking them, like, if we want to have a partnership with you, what can we do for you? And really just talking through and building that connection. Once you've established what sponsors you have, the hard part, and it's something that I struggle with, is keeping track of all the promises that you've made and making sure that you fulfill them. So we use a spreadsheet, and it has every sponsor we've ever contacted, and it'll say, like, have we contacted them for this year, 2017, 18, 19, 20, and we check yes. Have we heard back from them? We check yes or no. Are they interested? Yes or no. What did they sponsor? We find the financial equivalent to that, and we list out what we have to do in return. And that's where it takes that whole team of the communications team to fulfill those promises. I alone, as a sponsorship manager, cannot also update the website with the logos. I can't be putting out the 3 social media posts that I've promised them. It starts to add up when you have 100 sponsors. So really having that whole team in place and making sure that you're fulfilling the promises that you've made to the sponsors is really important. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Like sometimes we had an issue this past year with our t-shirts. We had a great company out of Colorado, Belong Designs, design these great t-shirts for us for the event. And we expected a lot of people to wear them at the event as they've done in the past. But due to like freezing cold weather and snow the whole time, nobody wore the t-shirts. They were wearing, you know, their big puffies and like snow gear. So we weren't able to capture any photos of the t-shirts at the event. We got like some stale, you know, pose shots, but ultimately the really good photos of the product at the event that we had promised them, we couldn't get. So in that situation, it's kind of tricky because, you know, they've invested time and money into our event and we've fallen short on our promise. So in that situation, I had to reach out to them and say like, hey, something out of my control affected this situation. So what can I do to make this right? And in that situation, the guy was fine. He was like, yeah, we'll get photos at some point. It doesn't matter. In other situations, companies can be pretty harsh. They can be pretty upset. And sometimes that's just the way it is. You do everything you can to smooth over relationships and hiccups like that. And you try to do your best to be impeccable with your word and with your timing of communication so that if there is an issue, it's presented pretty early on. And that way things can be resolved and you can look for solutions. But ultimately, sometimes it just probably won't work, and that's okay. There's so many companies out there that you don't want to necessarily have a relationship that's one-sided. You want to have that, you know, mutually beneficial relationship. Let's see. So when you're looking for sponsors, this can be kind of tricky. When I came into GGBY, there was already kind of a database of companies that we had reached out to through Slackline US, through Sonia Iverson. But finding companies to sponsor is a process. And I'd say for me, I think about GGBY probably every single day. So when I see a company or a product, I just kind of go there in my mind and I make a mental note to maybe reach out to them if it's worth it. But I'd say the best thing to do is identify your needs and then just do research. Just research companies. A lot of companies on their websites will have like sponsor tabs. They'll talk about ways in which they sponsor or ways in which they support the community. And they'll usually have a contact. So you can just contact whoever is on that website. Somebody asked me if cold calling is really bad, like if it's better to have a name or a connection with the company. And generally, yes, it definitely helps to be able to name drop and say like, I know Tom works for you. He told me that you guys might be interested in, you know, being a part of this event. It definitely helps. But I'd say it does not hurt at all to cold call, especially if it's a product or a company that you're really passionate about and you feel like would have a really great relationship with your event. I'd say if you're going to cold call, there's kind of 2 ways to go about it. If it's a company that's pretty run-of-the-mill, you're not that invested in it, just cold call. Just have a template email and present your event to that and see if they bite. Another way to cold call, if you're actually really interested in a product, is to present an argument of why. Like really tell them why their product is worth being at your event and what you can do for them. And a lot of times that they'll pick up on that passion, and they'll pick up on kind of the reason behind why you're so excited, and they'll be excited for you. So cold calling is okay. I last year had to cold call, I think like 6 different hospitals because we needed some medical supplies donated. And that's a weird one. I have no knowledge of like the healthcare system. It's just not something I've been a part of. So I don't even know how that system works. I don't know who to talk to. So that was really tricky for me. I was just emailing people and I got shut down a lot. And then I think 2 told me different avenues to go down. So it's definitely a process and it takes a lot of time. I actually got carpal tunnel emailing so much last year. Cold call, look up, but if you have connections, definitely do that. I know a lot of people go to like outdoor retailer and they meet people in person, because if you can meet people in person, then when you send that email and you say like, hey, we met at, and you know, remind them, and that sparks something, and it like you already have that connection with them. We met at this place. Remember we talked about rafting or whatever it is. So definitely cold call, but do networking generally, just day to day, do networking, talk to people, get excited about other people's products and companies so that you can build that relationship. With timing, as far as somebody asked me if there's a good time of day to email, I'd say no. I was always taught that you don't email late in the evenings. Seems unprofessional, but with the Slackline community in particular, it's so international. I don't know, it's what, 5 or 6 p.m. for Tom right now. It's like 10 in the morning for me. So for what we do with slacklining and with international communication, I'd say no. It doesn't really matter what time it is. As long as you are really present and aware of when you're emailing. Like, don't email late at night when you're exhausted and you're not going to remember what you wrote in the email, or you're going to say things that you don't mean because you're tired and maybe grumpy or something. So just be aware and always try to be your best self when you're talking to people that are sponsoring your event, for sure, because you are representing your event. So I represent a whole team of people, and on a larger scale, the whole Slackline community when I'm reaching out to these companies that have never heard of Slacklining before, and all of a sudden if I'm not following through on promises, or I'm saying things in emails that don't make sense, that looks bad. So yeah, just be aware of that. Let's see. So I want to talk briefly about being selective about your sponsorships. I tend to think about sponsorships as mostly me doing a lot of work for somebody else. They're giving us something, and I have to do a lot of work to make it worth their time for them to give us that. But it's also a two-way street. Sometimes I've had companies want to give us things or donate things that just are not worth my time. So you have to be selective in saying that maybe no, I don't want this food sponsorship because it can't feed the entire volunteer team, or maybe it's too close to the event. I can't do the social media posts that I need to do for you, and so I can anticipate that you're going to get angry about that. Be selective if you have to, because ultimately, if you're looking at 50 really good sponsors versus 150 not so good sponsors, your promises to them, as far as what we say like either 1 or 2 or 3 social media posts, a certain number of photographs of their product at the event, all those things, doesn't matter if they're a good sponsor or not, you still have to do those things for them. So if you have 50, it's great, it's really worth your time to do all those things for those 50 sponsors. If it's 150 and they're not that great, you are going to be exhausted by the amount of work that you have to do for these sponsors that aren't really giving you that much in return. So generally just be aware of that, and be aware that maybe earlier on in your event, you can't be that selective. You have to take what you can get. And then later, as your event starts to grow, you get more publicity, you get better sponsors, then you can start being more selective. You can start being a little pickier about who is sponsoring you. Let's see. Some key things to have like a successful sponsorship, or be a successful like sponsorship manager. Definitely be impeccable with your word, be timely so that you're responding to emails quickly. Don't wait 4 weeks and be like, hey, sorry, I've never got back to you about that $1,000 you wanted to donate or something. It just kind of looks bad. So be timely. Have a team if you need it, so that the stuff that you're presenting to them looks professional and they take you seriously. So we have like a whole sponsorship packet that took us a while to put together. But that way, when we email a company, it doesn't look, it looks more professional for us to say, like, here's what we can offer you. And it's really clear and spelled out. Yeah, be timely, I guess, is another big one. I personally do not do very well with the micro organization of sponsorships, of looking at that spreadsheet and following through with everything. That's actually why I'm stepping down. But I do much better at looking at the event and saying, we need this thing sponsored. I can see that there's a need for that. I can go find a sponsor, and then I can give it to my sponsorship manager, who will then do all of the coordinating with that sponsor to get that thing. So yeah, be aware of your own skill set, and find a team to help you out if you need it. I think that's probably most of the questions I have planned. I guess if you guys have any questions, I can answer them, but otherwise.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
I was wondering, like, how much of the total income at GGBY actually comes from sponsoring, like monetary sponsors you get, and how many of those 50 actually give money, how many give goods or something else?
I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head. I do know that it's getting better with each year. We don't have 50 sponsors. We have probably, I don't know, close to 70 to 100 sponsors that fluctuate whether or not they are sponsoring us. I do know most of our sponsorships have come in the form of food for the volunteers and gear. So Jerry with Balance Community is a huge sponsor for us. He's an internal sponsor too, because he's part of the event, but he's donated thousands of dollars to the event in the form of gear. The local restaurants have donated, I don't even know how much money, in the form of food. So I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately. But yeah,
I can.
Sorry.
If you want me to jump in there, I can answer
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Dan is the organizer, so he can answer that probably better than I can.
Yeah, because I take care of the finances. So it's about 2% of cash donations. So we get, most of our revenue is from ticket sales. But as of last year, it was around 2% of our actual cash influx was sponsorship. But as Maddie said, a lot of the sponsorships we don't are not cash sponsorships. They tend to be donations or like lending gear, like Jerry. Well, we pretty much buy all of our gear now, and we have all of it. But What the lines are big. So I don't have the financial estimate on that valuation, but in terms of actual cash, it's about 2%.
Cool, thanks a lot. Are these sponsors that you have for GGBY most? I mean, they're probably all commercial sponsors, or do you get any of the money from, let's say, some more official or even state government or regional authority? Are they also like a part of your sponsoring concept at all?
I understand. I think most of our sponsors are commercial businesses. I think, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but has the BLM has not helped us financially at all. In fact, I think they've
No,
done the opposite.
Well, we actually pay government agencies.
Right.
We don't get any money from them. We pay them in terms of permits, usage fees, but we have not gotten any government, and that's normal. Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting. I know in Europe there is a lot more government support for these type of events. In the U.S., it's the exact opposite, which is a philosophical idea. Not judging it here or there, but it's just the way it is, and so we end up paying for those type of things. But it would be interesting to see if we could get some help from sponsorships of cities and things like maybe Moab and to help us out a little bit more. But because we do bring a lot of value to GGBY to Moab, and Maddie's talked about that. But yeah, the bringing that relationship to the cities and to the government, it's kind of challenging in the U.S. But we have a great relationship with them nonetheless. It's just a different type of relationship compared to Europe.
I think GGBY is still pretty young as far as our sponsorship team goes. It takes a little bit of a reputation to be able to contact a company and get a sponsorship. So now that we have kind of 3 years under our belt, and I can tell them like our ticket sales have gone from this number to this number, they can look at that and say, oh wow, this event is growing. Here's how it's changed. Here's the media that other sponsors have gotten. So as the event grows, so will the sponsorships. Last year was, I think, one of our better sponsorship years. And I expected this year to be very good. I honestly don't know how this year will go now that the coronavirus has pretty much impacted everybody's financial plan for the year. So that'll be really interesting. Yeah.
Thanks for those answers. Interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions? If any of this sounds like something you guys are good at or interested in, I am stepping down from my position. Like I said, I don't do well with the nitty-gritty of the organization of sponsorships. I do much better with looking at the bigger picture. So if anybody's interested in pursuing a role with GGBY and with Slackline US, reach out to me. My email is Maddie, MADDIE, @slackline.us.
And I just want to say, Maddie she's stepping down, but she's moving up as our communications director. So
you've been working with me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she's not leaving us. I wouldn't have that at least this year. So she's stepping up into a larger role, and this is a great opportunity because she's done a tremendous job to build the framework, and we're so happy with what Maddie's done. So thank you, Maddie, for everything and for this great talk.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks, everybody, for coming and listening.
Thanks a lot, Maddie.
Cool.
Right. Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks. I'm glad you came. Cool. Well, I guess sign off. I hope everybody gets outside today. Have a good day.
Have a good one, Maddie. I'm going to go outside for a walk.
Awesome. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Cool. Tom, are we good?
I think so, yeah. I'm sorry, Christina, if you've just joined, we've just finished.
Yeah, I guess that was pretty short, but I got through
Cool. Well,
everything. I guess
that was good.
You'll post it and people can listen to it later. If anybody has questions later, also they can email me. I guess I can chat here. Hold on. Maddie at slackline.us. I put my email in there. If any of you have questions, definitely feel free to email me. Happy to answer questions or give advice or whatever. Yeah.
Cool. Cheers, Maddie.
All right. See ya.